So, hi, I am Vanya Foote, and I am the Executive Director of the Atlanta Chamber Players, and I'm here with composer Benjamin Krause. He's the winner of our latest Rapido National Composition Contest. This contest, the ACP has been producing since 2009, and it offers important performance opportunities to aspiring composers of any age, but it does have a twist. Registrants are tasked with writing a 4 to 6 minute composition piece in just one specific 14-day period. This kind of draws from real life scenarios of how some of the world's greatest classical composers were writing their masterpieces right up until curtain time. So a little bit about Ben before we turn it over to him. Ben's a composer and a pianist. And he has experience across a wide range of media. He is a recipient of numerous national awards and was named the 2018 Distinguished Composer of the Year by the Music Teachers National Association. His music has been performed worldwide with performances and commissions by the Houston Symphony, Network for New Music, Musica Links Project, and the Dolgani String Quartet. He received his DMA from Rice University, and as a pianist, he performs music ranging from the traditional classical repertoire to new music and jazz. He is currently on the music faculty at Hope College, where he teaches composition and theory. So welcome, Ben. It's nice to see you.
Thank you. Great to be here. Thank you for the introduction.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So congratulations again on winning the 2021 Rapido Composition Contest National Finals. It has been almost a year, which is crazy. Can you take us back a little bit? I don't think we've really spoken since right before then in a format like this. The composers, none of you unfortunately were able to join us in person, but you did tune in to the live broadcast. So can you take us back to your experience in watching and hearing your piece performed?
Yeah, by that point, I think we were all sort of used to the live streaming events because it had been going on for a while. And so that part wasn't too different, but it was very strange. And in a wonderful way, I think, hearing my music played alongside the other finalists through that format and seeing the other composers giving some talks through Zoom or, streaming. And, it was like my wife and I were watching the concert at our kitchen table. And, there's something kind of nice about the comfort of being at home and, playing it through some nice speakers. And it was, I thought it was a really nice event, even though I was disappointed that I couldn't be there in person and visiting, of course, the city of Atlanta, which I really like. It was a great experience. And then hearing my name at the end was a real thrill.
Oh, that's wonderful. So part of the overall prize for winning the cycle of the contest was a 2-week residency at the Hambidge Center, which is here in Georgia. Can you tell us a little bit about that residency experience and what were you working on during it?
Yeah, great questions. So the Hambidge Center is a really incredible place. And I was there for, like you said, about 2 weeks. And I was really devoting all of my time to finishing this piece for the Atlanta Chamber Players. When I arrived, it was about halfway done. So I wrote about half of the whole thing in those 2 weeks. It was in this very scenic part of northern Georgia near the North Carolina border with 7 or 8 other artists of all disciplines. So there were visual artists, a few writers, and I think at the time I was the only musician in residence, but sometimes there's more than one musician, or there can be dancers and choreographers and stuff like that. And so, most of the time was spent on my own in my studio, working, and we had the residents all had dinners together every evening in a kind of communal setting, which was really nice to get to know them and have conversations. And it was just really great. It was the ideal place that I could spend finishing this project, which there was a lot of work to do, but I could spend 8 to even 12 hours a day if I really needed to I didn't usually spend that much time because I tend to, I just can't handle it. You know, become kind of fried and stuff. But you could start to structure your time with breaks and go on walks. There was a lot of really beautiful places to go hiking. I went on some runs, and then there was like a river nearby that you could go swimming in. So lots of cool things to break up the day and cool off or go see some nature.
That sounds wonderful.
Yeah.
Have you done any residencies like that before, or?
Yeah, that was actually my third one, and it was very similar to my first, which was at the Brush Creek Center for the Arts in Wyoming, and I did that in 2018, so 2 or 3 years ago, I guess, 3 years ago. And it was similar in terms of how it's formatted, and that there's like 8 artists of different disciplines, and you each have your own studio, and you have meals together. So that's what it reminded me of. And then in 2019, I did a residency, which is just for composers, and it's one composer at a time. So it's very different in its feel. And that was at the Copeland House in Cortland, New York, which is about an hour north of the city of New York. And it's where Aaron Copland lived for the last 20 or 30 years of his life. And he basically left his house to be a residency for composers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that was a real treat. It was a little bit I mean, I was by myself for most of that time, but it was really amazing. Also an amazing experience.
Oh, that's incredible. So diving right into that then with the other component of winning the contest. So your initial piece was about 4 to 6 minutes, and then you were tasked with expanding it, nearly doubling it. And then that piece, actually the musicians of the Atlanta Chamber Players will premiere very soon this month. Mm-hmm. So take us through that process. So, I mean, you said you worked on it some at this residency, but you weren't necessarily constrained to any, that rigid time period. So, how did you approach that? And, how was it different or?
Yeah, well, in a lot of ways, it was like the reverse, like the opposite of the actual 2-week period we had initially. Because, I knew I was writing this piece starting right after the concert last January. So, I mean, I had some other projects on my plate. I didn't get to it right away, but I basically had from the spring until the end of the summer to write the rest of the piece. So several months. And I had already written, like you said, about 5 minutes of it. And it was supposed to, it was going to be somewhere around 15. So what's kind of crazy about the deadlines and composition is that the amount of work it takes just tends to fill up however much time you have. So if you have 2 weeks, it'll be done. And if you have 6 months, it'll take the full 6 months. And part of that in this case was just trying to decide what I was going to do to turn the 2 short pieces. Like, so my first submission for this was basically 2 contrasting pieces that added up to 5 or 6 minutes. And then my whole debate internally was, am I going to incorporate those into like a longer piece that's just like a single movement? Or am I going to just take some material out of there and just totally start from scratch and like move it in a different direction? And I didn't know how much of it I was going to use anyway. And what I decided to do was actually fairly true to my initial idea, which was, well, I have 2 contrasting works, 2 contrasting pieces that both respond to the pandemic in different ways, in very different ways. And I thought, well, I'm just going to write a bunch more short pieces that take different angles and different interpretations and reactions to the ways that I was thinking of daily life and just life during the pandemic. And thinking, well, this will just be a series of short pieces, like miniatures, that will form a suite or a collection. And then I'll just put them in a certain order and arrange them in a way that just tells a story. And I think a lot of times in parallel with literature and poetry, like I think of musical structure as kind of like reading through a story or reading a collection of poems. And so the analogy here would be that I just wrote a bunch of short poems, and here they are in a collection. they're all about very different things, and sometimes the moods are very different, and there's not a lot of connection between them necessarily. Like you might find in, like, let's say a multi-movement string quartet, especially like in the traditional sense by Beethoven or something, where they do tie everything together. These are very fragmented and distinct statements that are short, but they're just put into an order that to me tells some kind of story about, like a souvenir, various souvenirs from pandemic life. So I wound up with a total of 6 pieces, the 2 original ones being part of the collection.
Okay.
Yeah, that was it.
That was it.
Yeah.
Excellent. So obviously very different than, like you said, starting from scratch.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So your initial piece, as you said, dealt with themes of experiences during the pandemic, and you wrote it in June of 2020, and it's now November 2021. Were your themes still rooted in the original time period, the beginnings of the pandemic, so to speak, or did current experiences kind of influence it, or for lack of a better phrasing, are we still in the same environment?
Yeah, no, that's a good question, and in fact, it addresses. 2 of the pieces I ended up writing directly address these issues about time, and I think that this is something that was more acute in my own perception more recently rather than at the beginning. But what I mean is that it is hard to tell sometimes how much time has passed. The pandemic and the sense of isolation and confinement has distorted our sense of time. I heard somebody put this as temporal dysphoria, right? Which is just a distorted sense of how time has passed. And people in very other particular circumstances have suffered from this, whether it's from PTSD or some other traumatic event, where we cannot reconstruct the sequence of events that led up to where we are now. That's an example would be getting to the end of the day and not remembering what you did that morning. Another example that's maybe more of a generally felt thing with at least a lot of the people I've spoken with is that, it still feels like a year ago when I hear somebody say last year, I think of like 2019. The last year and a half has felt sort of like a month, but also like 5 years at the same time. So there's all of these contradictions and ways in which our sense of time has become distorted. And that's one thing that I had been thinking more and more about between June 2020 and now. And 2 of the pieces in the collection of 6 are musically they address different ways of dealing with time, which of course is a musical concern in the first place. But that's what they address. And then another thing, other than that, I should say, a lot of them were along similar lines. They were related to one of my first pieces that I wrote was just this idea that we're trapped inside and we're kind of anxious and restless. And one way of dealing with that for me is to let my imagination go and to find escape, through other means, whether it's reading or writing music or playing the piano, or just imagining some kind of inner life or inner game that can keep you occupied. And so that this sense of an inner life that keeps you sustained and keeps you excited about something in the future, that was a motivation for 2 of the pieces, one of the original ones, and then one more that I wrote more recently. And so to answer your question kind of in a shorter ways, like some of it had to do with things from the beginning, and some of it changed. Yeah.
That's what an interesting journey.
That's
very insightful. Right.
Yeah, no,
right.
Yeah, but that's what I was trying to address somehow through my music.
Oh, that's great. So then this culminates in the world premiere performance on November 14th, and you will actually be joining us in person
Mhm.
What are you, other than that, which I'm sure is exciting in and of itself, what else are you looking forward to in the experience?
Yeah, I'm really excited to hear those musicians play it live. I mean, it's as simple as that. I have heard some live concerts recently in limited situations. It's not like I haven't heard live music in a year and a half, but I haven't heard my chamber music played, like my any piece I've written for chamber ensemble in a long time, in person. And I'm looking forward to hearing the acoustics is it at First Presbyterian? Yeah, and you've done a lot of concerts there before, correct? Is that one of your regular venues?
Yes,
How do you think,
yes.
how does it sound in there? Is it very
It's
reverberant?
it sounds amazing, and it's quite a large venue,
Yes.
but it still sounds so intimate. It's actually works so well for chamber music. So
Oh,
yeah,
that's great because when I'm writing, I tend to idealize the acoustics for what I'm writing for. Like I want it to be in the perfect sounding space. Of course, every composer does. And one thing that I especially think of in my slower, more intimate music is a space with a lot of reverberation. And I mean, I don't think all of the pieces I wrote will need that, but I think a couple of the slower ones in particular, I'm really excited to hear those and to hear them in person. And to, of course, meet the people at the Atlanta Chamber Players, both both on staff and the musicians that are going to be playing. I'm really excited about that.
yes, us too. It was when we missed that opportunity, unfortunately, at the
Yeah.
finals, but we're very glad that we can continue in this capacity.
Yeah, yeah.
So, moving away a little bit from Rapido, what else have you been up to since January? Any other, commissioned work projects, other facets of your career?
Yeah, I've been fortunate to be pretty busy. Aside from teaching at Hope College, where I have a job, I've written a couple of choral pieces for various choirs. One of which was premiered over the summer by Lutheran Summer Music, which is a summer festival for middle and high school aged musicians, and where I'm also on faculty. So I wrote a choir piece that was really wonderful to hear in July, and I just finished another choral work for the Hope College choirs. And I guess most recently, and I have a few other things in the future, but most recently I was at the Indiana State Contemporary Music Festival, where the Indianapolis Chamber Orchestra performed a work of mine. This was just last week. So things are starting to pick back up again in terms of performances, which is great. And I'm very fortunate, in the sense that as a composer, I can at least always be working on something. I feel so bad for my performer friends who were really isolated for a long period of time. Whereas, at least I could optimistically look forward to having pieces finished in the future and make progress towards that. So there's a set of solo piano pieces that I'm almost done with. And of course, the Atlanta piece was a big part of what I've been working on the past year.
Absolutely. So you are a trained pianist. How does that factor into your composing? Is it beneficial, helpful? How does it influence it?
Yeah, it very much influences it. I mean, I think my interest in composition from the very beginning was driven by playing the piano and, not only learning all of the great pieces that I was trying to learn and practice, and then also getting into jazz as a pianist, which helped me improvise and learn more about harmony and rhythm. So all of those things, and really just the love of creating something at the keyboard was the first really gateway into composition. Having said that, there are some drawbacks to it, and it doesn't always help in the way that some people might assume that it does. Because, for example, for this piece for Atlanta, I was writing for string trio and clarinet, right? And of course, I could figure out some things on the piano, and I use that to my advantage. I try to come up with interesting melodies or harmonies or whatever. But it also requires me to step away and not let the piano get in the way, because it's not a clarinet and 3-string instruments. And some assumptions that I might make while playing something on the piano may not translate as well as I would hope to the actual chamber instruments. So, this is something that I'm continuously addressing in my own creative process. It's just to sort of find a balance between letting the piano help me come up with material, but also to step away from it and try to hear exactly what the clarinet and the strings might sound like together. And also just what they can do. The clarinet can do some really amazing things that I can't do on the piano. And with the strings, of course, with all the bowing techniques and effects. So it's a balance really for me.
Absolutely. So as you mentioned, you teach composition and music theory at Hope College. So, what do you share with these young composers who may want to go the same path you are, or similar, or what is it they need to be, I think, prepared with moving forward, whether I'm sure things change all the time, technologies change, what is it that they now need to be prepared with?
Yeah, good question. So I think the one thing that I'm increasingly discovering for myself and then trying to convey to students is that there is no path that they can just get on and follow. And like somebody wanting to go down my path, like my path is fairly, I don't want to say traditional, but like straightforward from the standpoint that I went from graduate school to graduate school and got my degrees in composition and primarily studied chamber and orchestral and instrumental music in general, so because that's the tradition I wanted to partake in. So anyway, when I'm talking to students, I don't want them to assume that there's any one particular path. I do like the instruction that is available, or the kind of education in traditional forms and techniques. Like students should understand the instruments and the ways that they've been written for in the past. But also students can find all sorts of pathways to creativity through electronics, computer music, video game music, blending media together, whether it's video and electronics and acoustic music. And so the big thing that I want to convey to young composers and students is to not make any assumptions about what path they may follow, that there's no model for them that is like where they need to be, that they can discover their own path and put together their own creative life. And it's something that I'm simultaneously learning as I try to convey it to my students.
Oh, absolutely. And so speaking of then, electronics and other media, what have you had experience in, or that may be, non-traditional?
Yes. Well, I don't even know if I would go as far as to call it non-traditional, but I've
That's true.
Because who knows?
Yeah.
And I've done some scoring of electronic, like film scores using electronics and synthesizers. The last film I did was 8 or 9 years ago, so it's not something I do that often. I've written podcast music for 2 different podcasts. I guess that's bordering on more on the commercial side, using synthesized instruments and drums and keyboards and stuff to make catchy little themes. I really like doing that kind of stuff, occasionally at least. And the rest of what I've done outside of acoustic music has mostly been as a student, because, in school you have to really stretch yourself and take a variety of classes. So I did a lot of electronic experimentation in graduate school.
Very cool.
just not a path that I ended up really pursuing as much since then, but it's great that I had that experience, and I still use it and apply it to various ends.
And now that this, your work on this particular project with us is nearing completion, what are you working on? Anything else? Any other commissions now? Any other projects kind of on the horizon? You said things are starting to pick back up.
I just finished. I think I mentioned, but I just finished it a new choral work for actually for a Christmas kind of special concert in December here at Hope College for the choir here, and I'm currently in the middle of a big set of piano pieces, which is probably my biggest piece ever yet, up to this point, because it's not only has it taken me, I've been working on it for almost 2 years, but on and off, but it's a set of 8 pieces that will be around 40 minutes or so, 30 to 40 minutes. So it's, even though it's just for solo piano, there's still a ton of notes and they're big pieces, and I'm really excited about them, but I hope to have them finished by January or February. So, and I have a couple of potential things in the pipeline, but I'm not making any particular plans yet past February, because we're expecting our first child also in February. My wife.
Oh, congratulations!
Thank you. Here's my announcement for the Atlanta Chamber Players. Although it's not private information at this point. We're due in a few months, but I'm trying to keep my musical schedule, at least put it on a short hiatus in February and March. And so I'm not seeking too much right now, unless it's farther down the road than that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, I'm sure you could probably relate. Yeah.
Yes. And February is a good month. My son was born in February. So.
Oh, what day?
Valentine's Day.
I'm hoping that could be, we have a boy due on the 19th.
Oh, well, so, I will be hoping for Valentine's Day.
Yeah. It could also be like 2/22/22. It's a great month. It's February 22. So there could be some cool numbers in there too. We'll see.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, I look forward to that, hearing more about that project personally. So, but speaking of your wife, she also plays piano, and the two of you have performed in a duo, right?
That's right.
Yeah. So, I find, and again, I met my husband in performing arts. We still both work in the performing arts. So, I know the challenges, but I also know how fun those shared experiences can be. So let us know about, are you still do performances together? And
and she's very active as a soloist and as a collaborative pianist. And so like most of her playing is with singers and instrumentalists. That's really her specialty. And we do play a lot together. And in fact, this week on Friday and Saturday, we're recording a series of videos for the Oregon Bach Festival, because we're guest artists for their composer symposium, which took place this past summer, but it's mostly virtual. So this is the end result: is we're recording 17 new pieces on Friday and Saturday, 2 recording sessions, 17 pieces with 2 video cameras and audio and all of this stuff. So that is our big project right now. And occasionally, aside from that, we perform occasionally throughout the year, but it tends to be a little bit secondary lately to like my own composing and her performing elsewhere in other projects. But it's nice to have that together. It's not our primary thing, but it's just a great way that both of our musical lives link up.
Absolutely. Yeah. So as we wrap this up, just a kind of a final question about Ben Krause, the person.
Sure.
What TV shows or podcasts are you into right now? What are you listening to? What are you watching?
Yeah, we usually have like one show at a time. I don't like getting sucked into too many shows because I also read a lot, and I don't know. It's not that I'm too busy. It's just that I have to be careful about how many TV shows. But we just finished. We enjoyed Ted Lasso. We started the new season of Curb Your Enthusiasm, which is one of my favorite shows. And what else recently? I guess those are 2 comedies, but sometimes we get into dramas. Oh, we watched this HBO miniseries that was from a few years ago, but Olive Kittredge, which is a book that came out maybe 10 years ago that won the Pulitzer Prize by Elizabeth Strout, I think. It's a really wonderful book. Olive Kittredge, and then it was set with Frances McDormand as the lead character, and Bill Murray's in it. So we finished that about a week ago. So I mostly like comedies and stuff. And for podcasts, I listen to like a lot of interview shows, like long form interview, like the Ezra Klein show is interesting. There's a really kind of obscure podcast I like called The History of Literature, which is just this book nerd who goes through all these different authors and styles of mostly novels, but sometimes there's short stories and plays and poetry discussed as well. So that's fun. And kind of blanking on some other ones. I'm a huge tennis fan, a tennis fanatic. And so there's this podcast called the Tennis Podcast that I keep up with as well.
Very cool. Well, thank you. And
Sure.
Thanks so much for taking the time. And we
Yeah.
look forward to seeing you in the flesh here on Sunday, November 14th. And for those of you listening, you can find all this information and more on our website at atlantachamberplayers.com. And we must thank the Antonori Foundation for major funding and support of the Rapido Composition Contest, and specifically to Ron Antonori and to Paula Peace for launching this initiative in 2009. And it has since spurred the creation of over 400 short new works for chamber ensemble and has launched the careers of countless composers. So much appreciation to the long history of this contest. And Ben, we love that you are a part of this history. So thank you again.